It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network. This is the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports media business industrial complex and all of its above board, underhanded, and sideways dealings. Steve, how are you today?
That's good, and I think underhanded is an apt way to describe at least one of our stories here today. But no, everything's going okay. You know, how about you?
Normal.
This is one of these weekends. We're recording this on Saturday, as we always do, and this is one of these weekends where I've got multiple hours in a row to record, so I've got to do the Hogstye too, and so it's and we're all in different time zones, and so this is one of these Saturdays where I have to get up before 6 a.m., which is just never the right thing to do on a Saturday. This is my dedication to you people.
Yes, it is. It is early for me, but not quite that early. So if I've got a phlegmy vocal quality, there's the explanation.
Yeah, now you know why. Now we know why vocalists don't like to sing or get up before 10 a.m. Part of it is that they're drug addicts, but the other part of it is that your voice is just ruined first thing in the morning.
Yeah, if anyone out there, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there, are Howard Stern fans. That he would have to cajole artists that would show up to do the show to sing, and he couldn't even either behind the scenes or just even browbeating them on the air. Sometimes it never worked. They just were steadfast. They'll talk and they'll probably tell salacious stories about their personal life, but they were not going to sing at 7:40 a.m.
Yeah, very few of them, for sure. And I think the ones that did probably just stayed up all night would be my guess.
Right. Yeah. Obliterate the idea of mourning.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, they are artists after all. Rock stars aren't the type that go to bed at 9 o'clock to do a 6 a.m. radio show.
True. All right, well, let's jump into it. We are going to wade into the waters of Major League Baseball, Georgia's voting, and all of that fun stuff, as I'm sure... Unless you're sleeping under a rock, basically, and if you don't know this story, I'm not quite sure why you're listening to the show, but hey, we're happy to have you. Georgia has new voting laws. We're not really here to debate whether they're restrictive or not. Obviously, there is divided opinion about that, and Major League Baseball has, I guess, made the decision that they are too divisive for them to hold their annual All-Star game in Atlanta, and have since moved it to Colorado, basically to the Braves Stadium, to the Rocky Stadium. There will be financial fallout, and there is obviously political fallout, and there is obviously just opinion fallout on this. So, Steve, do you have any sense? I have a little bit of a sense, but do you have any sense of what the financial impact of this decision will be?
I've heard some numbers, and yeah, first of all, guys, we're not a political show. Obviously, Chris and I have opinions. We, between us, have legitimately not talked about how we feel about this bill. So if you're looking for that, there's a bunch of other shows you can go to. Now, yeah, so the impact here is, number one, there's an impact on the city of Atlanta. There's going to be an impact on the city of Denver. And then there's an impact to Major League Baseball. So, number one, the numbers I've seen is about $100 million to Atlanta. That's what's been reported. I've not fact checked that. There's no real way to fact check it. So let's just take that for fact for the purposes of this discussion and hypothetical. So basically, what baseball has done is they've taken roughly $100 million, and they've moved it to the state of Colorado. The statement that they issued did get political. I don't really personally care where the All-Star game is necessarily in and of itself. For me, what I do care about is not that I even care about, because I don't care about Major League Baseball's politics either. What I think is dumb, though, is for Major League Baseball to get involved in any politics. This is what I think is stupid. And I've said this on other topics on this show. This is an entertainment industry fundamentally. it's sports, but it's fundamentally entertainment because what you're trying to do if you're running a sports league is to get people to spend their hard-earned money and recreational money on your league, and that's what baseball is doing. So by taking political stances, you're by its very nature alienating or at least making mad a certain segment of really two segments of the population. One are the people who disagree with the political stance you're taking. And then two, you're also alienating the people who don't want you to take any political stance. So, and this is what I think is dumb. And we could get into the politics of Atlanta, the racial component of Atlanta versus Denver. And I think part of the argument is that Atlanta is I don't know if it's a majority minority city, but it's certainly a very large percentage of the population is minority. And so by moving it to one of the whitest cities in the country, it's sort of antithetical, if you will, to the political stance that Major League Baseball took. And so I personally, I think baseball's are a bunch of cowards. Rob Manfred in particular. If it had been me, I would have just ignored the whole thing. And if somebody asked me, said, "Listen, we're a baseball league. We don't do politics. We're having our All-Star game. It's planned. Enjoy it." That's kind of my thought.
It's interesting on a number of levels, and it's one of those things that's like not nearly as cut and dry as it seems, sort of, at the headline level. One, I don't really have the same kind of. I understand Steve's point, which he makes on a number of occasions on a number of different topics, and my feeling is a few ways. One, I have a baseline agreement that I don't always want your peanut butter in my chocolate, right? So, yes, it's gotten to the point where
I like the analogy, Chris. That was good.
Yeah, well, people our age will remember the commercials, where it's just this political discourse, kindly, and political divisiveness, more kind of real, has seeped into all aspects of life, and it does become exhausting. So I have an empathy and even a similar kind of emotional reaction at times to that. However, it's also the flip side of that is because it's seeped into everything, that everything is political, So it's sort of like we can think or wish that wasn't always the case, but it just also is the reality. So anything like this is going to have these kinds of reactions. What I find interesting here is the sort of unintended consequences of either altruistic corporate decisions and speech or cynical corporate speech and actions, which doesn't, whether your take on that sort of doesn't really matter.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, yes. I would say this. What I find interesting in this case is the leadership on the ground. And so, at the sort of like easiest way to sum it up in one person is Stacey Abrams urged
Stacey Abrams being the former Senate gubernatorial candidate in the state of Georgia, who's now an activist, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and the political organizer that delivered Democratic victories. So, just as you said, political organizer, right? She's a political force, especially in Georgia. She urged Major League Baseball both privately and in a USA Today op-ed that this was the wrong move. And was some other black activists, and Senator Warnock, as well as a corporate black activist leader, I don't have his name off the top of my head, all were pretty anti this move for a number of reasons. One, the economic fallout, which I've also seen the 100 million, and often probably hurts as much of their constituency as it does to help. Probably seeing it as a flashpoint narrative that obscures the details, so it sort of changes the conversation in unhelpful ways. And also that, yes, Atlanta, I don't have the demographics in front of me, but culturally, Atlanta is considered almost the capital of Black America to a large degree. Culturally, politically, business wise. And
I mean, there's
so,
other majority African American cities, but certainly in the South, at least. I mean, that's a fair. If you want to subjectively describe it, that's probably fair.
yeah. And so that there's a certain amount of, to somewhat to Steve's points around Colorado versus Georgia, you're taking a marquee event away from a kind of cultural center that, could potentially have had as much political voice and symbology and all those type of things by keeping the game there. So I find now I'll lay a very kind of pedestrian version of my opinion on the table, only to say that at first glance, I don't have a big problem with this. I understand why they did it. I probably politically agree, but what I find interesting is the unintended or unseen consequences of a knee jerk reaction, which I do think this has some hallmarks of. However, Major League Baseball, whether you view it cynically or altruistically, knows their business. So there's some risk management that they decided was going to be in the favor of them making their decision.
Yeah. I mean, everybody who's listened to the show for a while knows that Chris and I are on the opposite ends of the political spectrum. That's not a surprise. So you can probably guess what my view is in general. First of all, while Chris was talking, I pulled up the U.S. Census Bureau statistics. So according to the U.S. Census Bureau, which if you can't trust them, who can you trust? 51% African American, 40.9% white, what they're calling white alone, whatever that means, and then very small percentage of others, and 38% white alone, not Hispanic or Latino. So I guess what they're saying is 40.9% Caucasian and Hispanic, and then 38.3% white, and then 51. So it's a majority African American city. Let's summarize it like that. Well, it's definitely a knee-jerk reaction. I definitely agree with you there, because baseball announced this 5 seconds after it became a public issue, and all of a sudden baseball's moved. I mean, I guess they know their business, but I don't think they spent any time to consider it. And you're right in that Stacey Abrams in particular and others said, "Hey, you can't do this," but they did it so fast. It was such an immediate reaction that I don't think that they considered the business effect at all. I just think they went, "Whoa, we got to do this," and it's done. And by the way, I did see that the former baseball commissioner, Faye Vincent, wrote a scathing criticism of Rob Manfred in particular. It was published in somewhere, a Wall Street Journal maybe. You just don't see that very often, so I thought that was interesting. But I come back to my original point, Chris, which is I have absolutely no desire whatsoever, zero, to see my entertainment get involved in politics. I don't need a baseball league to tell me how to vote. I don't need a baseball league to tell me how to think. I have no desire for their opinion. I know more than they do about it. And I think they're absolutely doing the wrong thing here. And the economic consequences, I think, on a majority African American, now that we know it's a majority African American city, that's just baseball stupidity. Again, this is why I don't think they put any thought into it at all. I think this is Rob Manfred for whatever reason. And part of it may be, Chris, that the baseball doesn't have nearly as many politically active, or at least publicly politically active players as, say, the NBA. But they do have some, like Mookie Betts comes to mind. I think he's probably the most active one. I think his father's an activist as a career, I think. So it may be that he was trying to, I'm trying to use the right word, appease, for lack of a better term, that element of his league maybe. But I just think this is something that baseball it's a knee-jerk reaction they didn't consider at all. And I think the smart thing for all corporations is just to go, look, this is not the service we provide, period. And just stay out of it. That's what I would do, because I wouldn't want to alienate my customers. Because there's other business, like Black Rifle Coffee. I don't drink coffee. But Black Rifle Coffee is a company that's owned by veterans. It's marketed specifically to conservative-oriented media outlets. The Daily Wire, which is Ben Shapiro's company, and Outkick, the Coverage, which is Clay Travis. He's not a conservative, but he appeals to that demographic. And then there's companies that appeal to others, like Nike, you know, and I think it's just not good for business. If I was in charge of a major business, I would stay out of all of it and just go, look, here's the service we provide, please buy it. So I don't agree with any of this. And I don't like, if I were Black Rifle Coffee, I wouldn't want to just market to just conservatives either. I'm not trying to pick sides. It's all dumb.
Yeah, and I have some sympathy for that opinion, or I don't actually disagree with it. And that's what in all of those boardrooms, big and small, they obviously discuss this and make decisions.
I just
Um,
think it's people, Chris, that have money and so they think they're smarter than the average person, and we're going to educate you, and it just offends me at every level.
I don't necessarily take that as the motivation, but I don't know either. There's obviously a very cynical read to any of this.
I'm not saying that's. I'm saying that's how I take it, and that's
Yeah,
how I feel, what I feel.
yeah. I mean, I sort of, if I have a health, which is really kind of a funny sidebar to this whole story. If you sort of take the particulars out of it, my distaste and cynicism for corporate America is my baseline as a general philosophy. Um, and so it's very hard for me to separate that sort of headline worldview from these kinds of decisions, because I ultimately just think that they're, and that they're, greenwashing. So is a good example of this. So you see these corporations that do all these things for environmental activism, but most activists or people involved in these issues call it greenwashing because they say they're just, it's just marketing. It's just, we'll wash our stuff in green buzzwords, and we'll, escape the critical eye of our practices, which may be a totally different thing. So, that this is pretty common. And it definitely smacks of, licking your finger and putting it up in the air and seeing which way the wind blows, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see. I actually, in this case, probably give them the benefit of the doubt, but that doesn't mean it was necessarily a smart decision. I mean, Greg Bluestein, a political reporter, he sort of broke the news on Stacey Abrams, and I'll read his tweet real quick because I think it's interesting. I'm told that Stacey Abrams spoke to Major League Baseball senior advisor and, quote, strongly urged the league to keep the All-Star game in Atlanta before the decision to yank the event. She also argued against a boycott before the move, so in the preemptive USA Today op-ed. So she even tried to do like a sort of behind the scenes and overtly before and after the decision was made. And to me, if you care about the issue, which is totally legitimate, and Citizens United, corporations are political animals, right? They can do these things. They have the option, they have the rights. Whether it's smart or not, it's debatable. I think if you want to make a statement, you should listen to experts. And so ultimately, where I come down on this is like, I find it ultimately an ineffective tactic, even if I attribute altruistic motivations to their thinking.
Two things. Number one, like the impact for me is I'm not going to watch the All Star game. I'm a big baseball fan, as everybody knows. I'm going to boycott the All Star game for this, and I can guarantee you, I'm not the only one. And so they have lost audience. Number two, there is precedent for this, and I guess we haven't. This has just occurred to me right now, but the NBA did the same thing. The All Star game a couple years ago. Don't hold me to the year, but I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, the All Star game was supposed to be in Charlotte. And that was around the time that the state of North Carolina passed a transgender bathroom bill. And the bill basically said you have to be a biological male or female to use the appropriate bathroom. And Major League Baseball yanked the All-Star game out of Charlotte for that reason. And so there is precedent to this. We've made our point about how I'm not going to repeat myself. I just continue to think that Major League Baseball took a knee-jerk reaction without thinking about the consequences at all, and here we are. And so what have they done? They've taken money out of a majority African-American city, which is who they are purportedly trying to stand up for. You can agree or not agree, again, with their stance, but that's what they're trying to do. And then they've lost audience. So to me, all of what they've done is a complete failure.
For the record, I will also not watch the Major League Baseball All-Star game.
You're not a baseball fan,
I
though.
am a baseball fan, but I have not watched an All-Star game in probably 10 to 15 years.
I think I've probably, in some capacity, I've watched all of them in the past 10 or 15 years, except this year, which I will not.
I hate all All-Star games. Name the team and move on.
You know what is the most fun to watch is I love the home run derby.
Yeah, no,
I always watch that.
I do like the home run derby as well.
Although,
yeah.
if I were, I don't know if I were a hitter, I'd want to participate in it because it seems to ruin the guys who play it and do it,
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It usually means they go cold for the rest of the summer.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. That is a funny little fallout from that. Yeah, we'll see. I think it'll be hard. I don't think the boycott will amount to much. I think that's been that's been the case. You'll see some dip, but I don't think it'll be
Oh, I'm not trying to
substantial.
organize a boycott. I'm saying
others
he
are.
lost me, and I'd bet my life that I'm not the only one. I mean, but nobody's organizing a boycott. I've not seen any call for that. I'm just saying, if you get political with me, I'm done with you, period. That's it. That's my stance for all these leagues.
So we'll see. I imagine there'll be more fallout from this. I think Colorado is an interesting choice. But
That's
we'll
what
see.
I mean. The whole thing is just a total knee-jerk reaction. If you're gonna think it through and go, well, we're trying to. Again, I disagree with the politics of it. But if you're trying to support minorities, maybe maybe we ought to move it to like Miami. How about that? Instead, you pick the whitest city in the country almost, with no forethought whatsoever to it.
Yeah, and also even if your decision is to be overtly political, you probably ceded more platform than you gained.
That's exactly right. This is why and again, we're not here to talk about the bill, but if you're trying to make a political stance over the bill, Major League Baseball did it in the most ham-handed, stupidest way possible. That's what I would have done if I was going to support the opposition, which I wouldn't do. But if I was, I would have kept the bill, kept the All-Star game in Atlanta, and then had some sort of stance, do something at the game itself. That's what I would have done if I was going to take that position, which I wouldn't take. But if you follow what I'm saying, that would have been the smart thing to do.
You are sacrificing platform for sure, which anyone who's familiar with political organizing knows that you never give away platform if you're actually looking to be effective. So there we go. The hot button issue of the day. We'll see how it plays out.
And Chris and I did not really want to talk about this, particularly because we don't want to get involved in politics, but it truly was a big issue, I think, and we kind of had to address it.
Yeah, for sure. I think we did a good job. So we'll move on to something that no one really wants to talk about either, quite frankly, which is the fall of Deshaun Watson. This guy, it's amazing because if you think about, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, where the most intriguing, fun NFL watcher story, pure sports story was what the hell was going to happen to Deshaun Watson, what the hell was going to happen, what was going on within the Houston Texans, front office that let a team with such talent filter away. Would Deshaun Watson be a Carolina Panther? Would he be on the Washington football team? Everyone, sports radio was alive with wild trade scenarios. That was actually fun. And it was because this guy was a dynamic top 5 quarterback with a ton of personality. And that was the most exciting offseason football story, and now here we are with 25 separate civil and now criminal cases pending?
No, it's 22. I just looked at this as of Saturday morning when we're recording this. It's 22. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, and it was 16, I think, then. And now, so it's grown. And there's also another accuser that did a Sports Illustrated article or interview in Sports Illustrated. There's that. So we want to address this again because it's a very dynamic story. So the number's grown to 22. Now, here's the real interesting part. Well, basically, first of all, for those who are living under a rock, let me summarize this. So the accusations are all basically the same, and the accusations are Watson contacts these women, most of whom are masseuses, a couple of whom are not. Some of them were like estheticians, which are people who do skin and they inject do things like Botox. A couple of them are physical trainers, but most of them are masseuses. So Watson contacts them usually on social media, usually on Instagram. Excuse me, we got this morning phlegmy stuff. Sorry, folks. Much better. Anyway, and so then he sets up a massage, and what he did basically is then he would get completely naked and then do inappropriate things. I'm trying to be PG-13 here. He was doing inappropriate thing. He would like move his private parts to touch the woman or put it in her hand, and he would ask them to do stuff to him. That's what all 22 of these allege that. And I think three of them, at least three, I haven't read the last three that just got filed the other day, but three of them allege that he physically grabbed the woman and tried to move her head down towards his junk. So, which is, under a criminal context, would be sexual assault. So that's what he's done. So here's the interesting part. All of these are filed as Jane Doe's. Well, the defense counsel, who's Rusty Hardin, who's probably the most well-known criminal attorney in the state of Texas, has filed motions in almost all of them to ask the court to have the plaintiffs name the women. And a few of these motions have been granted. Most of them have not yet been ruled on. So, at least in some of them, and I would assume probably all of them eventually, the names of the women will come out, which that is interesting. Now, the other thing that happened is that Watson is slowly being dropped by all his corporate sponsors, are all abandoning him in droves, which isn't surprising. No corporation wants to be associated with this kind of stuff. What's up in the air really are two things, I think, Chris. One, what's the NFL going to do? The NFL has been weirdly and strangely silent, and I think it's because Watson is a franchise quarterback. If this had been like the backup linebacker for the Bengals, he'd already be on the commissioner's exempt list. Because it's Deshaun Watson, they don't want to do that. And the other thing is the criminal part of it. Now, 2 weeks ago, there was not a criminal investigation. Now there is a criminal investigation going on this. So that remains to be seen what happens. So, Chris, thoughts about the latest on Mr. Watson?
I think, as I said 2 weeks ago, I'm severely bummed out because he was one of my favorite non-Washington football team players. So that just has me from I am a deep fan of the National Football League, and because the Washington football team have been, well, let's just say less than lovable for long stretches, I have a lot more invested in the league as a whole. It's as all sports, it's my favorite to follow the league, So, and sort of have, asterisk favorite players outside of my favorite team. So that just, I really am having an emotional reaction to that. But whatever, who cares? No one. The sponsorships, yeah, they are flying fast, and I'd
Nike
say
and Beats are both gone.
Yeah, and I'd say I totally agree with your interpretation of why the league is silent, but I also think the longer they're silent, my assumption or my educated guess is the longer the exemption, commissioner's exemption list, suspension, however they classify it, will be. I think one of the reasons why they haven't done anything yet is because they're taking in all the facts. But I think this is so toxic and so confusing, and it's going to take so long to disentangle that I think he will see a significant timeout in the 2021 season. And if I were to wager a guess, I'd say he does not play this upcoming season.
Oh, I agree there completely. I can't imagine that he could possibly play, and I also think that if this was like the Texans' backup linebacker or something, it would have cut him probably for this. But, and by the way, this is why he hasn't been traded too. He just signed a new contract.
Yeah, right before last season.
Yeah, his contract was signed. Let's see, That's the other one.
I think it was summer
Yeah,
2020, right?
yeah, it was September 2020. So he's got a huge mass, and this contract was $156 million. He's got a massive dead cap hit, huge, like $67 million dead cap hit. He was even on. He was the Texans were never going to trade him, except as the only way they could trade him and not lose a lot of money in trading him would be post June 1st trade. No other way would have allowed them to not take a big salary cap hit. And as we all know, the salary cap was a major problem this year. But I think that now we know why Deshaun is so anxious to get out of Houston. It never really made sense to me why all of a sudden he was so mad. Why a year ago, less than a year ago, he happily signed a $156 million contract, and all of a sudden now he hates the organization, is never going to play there again. Obviously, now we know why. Because these kind of things don't fall out of the sky. You don't just get a lawsuit dropped on you out of nowhere. I'm convinced he knew about this. He might have gotten a demand letter from these women first. He knew this was coming, and I think that's why he wanted to run away from the state of Texas, personally. But yeah, I think, by the way, for those who don't know, Chris knows, but for those who don't know what the commissioner's exempt list is, that's your paid suspension list. That's what they do to you when they can't let you play, they can't let you on the field because something's going on, but they don't really have grounds yet to suspend you with pay, which is a CBA thing. And so they put you on the commissioner exempt list, which is basically to say, go home and go away. We're going to pay you for now until we don't have to pay you anymore. So, but I definitely think this is why Deshaun wanted to be traded.
I would imagine it probably was a piece of it for sure. Um, a couple things. I take two weird, not weird interpretations, but outcomes here. One, yeah, and I'm no fan of, and I just don't care. I'm not a fan of, and I actually think they're a pretty bad franchise, or at least have been in the last few years. But you have to feel a little bit for the Texans because they went from having they went from having a problem to a real problem because they had to figure out what to do with him and make him happy or whatever. And from a football standpoint, that was interesting. But they had some leverage. They had the leverage of the contract. They had the leverage of if they were able to swing a deal, and we've seen bad like Carson Wentz and other trades where some level of evening out of cap ramifications was part of the deal. So they had chips to play. Now they're just screwed, right? Because with the exemption list, they can't get any return. They don't get the player. So their situation went from bad to much worse. And I just don't understand what he is doing. Why do you listen, if you're a horn dog and you're a multi-millionaire, get a high-priced prostitute. It's a financial transaction. Everyone understands. If you get caught, I mean, you could be embarrassed, I guess, to some degree, but and there might even be some
crime.
Yeah, but
it's probably not a felony.
It's not going to ruin your career, right? It may ruin your reputation. It might soil your reputation.
I've got a better idea. If you're Deshaun Watson, spend 30 minutes in a nightclub.
Right? Yeah.
You don't need to go to hookers. He's Deshaun Watson. Spend 30 minutes in a nightclub.
Yeah.
Period. You and I wouldn't and couldn't do that. He's a famous athlete. Spend 30 minutes in a Houston area nightclub.
Yeah. So
solved.
I don't understand how. I mean, messages on social media, texting, asking random professional masseuses to do rub and tugs. It's like none of this why are you putting yourself? You can do these things in either one of Steve or I's paths, and there are other paths. It's the same kind of critique I have when you see rich athletes or other rich people get DUIs. Get a driver. It's pennies to you. And you can do all the debauchery you want, you just get a driver.
Go rent a limousine for the night.
Yeah. So I don't, it's just mind-boggling how these players in this specific instance, put themselves at this level of risk because the mound of evidence, the transparency of these interactions, we should all know about how the internet works in 2021. It's unconscionable to me.
He's risking $156 million Now I have a theory as to why he's doing this. Number one, he's a dumb guy. He's not joining Mensa anytime soon. He's probably not very smart. He didn't think about this. And the other thing is, the man is a pervert. Okay, this is a fetish. Because what has not come out, in the media, it's because they're trying not to get fined by the FCC, and I'm trying to keep it PG-13 here as well. But this is not just a rub and tug thing, Chris. The petitions. I'm going to say this in as clinical a way as I possibly can. Most of the petitions allege that he asked the women repeatedly to digitally manipulate his anus. Okay, that's not just a rub and tug. That is, and he has finished, for lack of a better term, in strange ways and at strange times, and all that is documented in the petitions, which are allegations and may be totally untrue. But it's more than just like a Robert Kraft style rub and tug. This dude is asking them to do other things, and so that tells me he has weird fetishes, which is why he's not going to nightclubs. So I think those two things: one, he's just not smart; two, he's got a couple perverted fetishes. And by the way, that's not who I want in my quarterback as my quarterback. Go watch some film. Stop. If you wanted massages, the Texans could get you any massage you needed. They have people on their training staff who could do that. So this in no way was ever about a massage. This is him satisfying his weird, perverted, carnal desires.
Yeah, and I think as regular listeners know, I'm on team let your freak flag fly. So there's still ways to do that don't put your career in jeopardy.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing for his fetish. I mean, I think it's weird, but I mean, you do you as long as it's legal. There's legal ways to get this done,
or even gray area legal ways that don't put your career in jeopardy.
He's Deshaun Watson. He could get a woman to do almost anything to him.
Yeah,
I think it wouldn't take any effort at all.
The technical term, Steve, I believe, is a prostate massage. If you want to.
Okay, I was trying not to. Yeah, that's what he was asking for.
Yeah, you want to stay safe, stay clinical.
Yeah.
Steve, I'd be remiss as a Texas lawyer. It sounds like a new John Grisham novel or something. But this is kind of
is a John Grisham novel.
This is a battle of two kind of heavyweight Texas-based lawyers, right?
Yeah. So the plaintiff's lawyer, Tony Busby, is probably a top 3 plaintiff's attorney, at least in the Houston area, and maybe in the state of Texas. This is not just a regular back of the phone book ambulance chaser. This guy has as much money as Deshaun Watson. He has been very successful. He has a whole major operation. But if you guys don't understand this is how it works. He has a name, and so he doesn't have too many lawyers working for him. He's got an army of paralegals who process all these car wreck claims and everything, and that's how he makes a ton of money. So Tony Busby's not doing this for money. He's doing this for attention. Okay? Now, the other attorney on the other side, his name is Rusty Hardin, who I wouldn't say I know him very well, but I have met and talked to him a couple times. He was, I think, a former Harris County DA. He had a very high-profile He's had many high-profile representations. The biggest one was Roger Clemens, when Roger Clemens got charged with perjury for lying to Congress about steroids. Rusty Hardin defended him. These guys are. Hardin is without a doubt the top criminal attorney in the state of Texas. That having been said, I think he made a major mistake early in the case, because in the past 2 weeks, what he did was he got statements from 18 masseuses that said, Deshaun didn't mistreat us. It was perfectly fine. Now, of course, what that has done is that puts the total, if by my count, up to 41 masseuses that this man has seen in the past year. So I almost think that makes him look worse. And just to say, the fact that he didn't do inappropriate things to 18 of them has no bearing on whether the other 22 got abused. So I think Rusty made a mistake personally in that. But yeah, these two guys are titans of Texas law. It's not in any way. It is a major battle.
Yeah,
a fully funded battle on both sides, I might add.
With names to go, Rusty Hardin and Tony Busby. So even the name sounds like a cartoon matchup.
Yeah, they do. It does. A battle of used car dealers.
Yeah, exactly. So that's actually a not nearly as important as many other aspects of the case, but I do think it's interesting when you have lawyers with big reputations start to line up. I mean, it just sort of everything on this is ramping up in intensity.
Oh yeah, it is this big time. Now, one thing I don't believe at all is that this isn't about money. All of these petitions say the same thing. There's the last three that got filed. I've only briefly glanced at, but they all say specifically ask for the minimum damages under Texas law, but at the same time they've pleaded for intentional infliction of emotional distress, which is a treble damages issue. So it's not. They're not just looking for a minimum. And if they really were, if I were Deshaun, I'd go to them and say, if you're looking for a minimum amount of damages, I'm going to offer you, here's a settlement. I mean, what really are you, if you're not looking for money, what are you looking for? Are you trying to go through a trial and get a judgment against him? Maybe you are, but the only remedy under civil law is money. So if you're not doing it for money, I don't really know why you're doing it. And again, I know why Tony Busby's doing it, but I don't know why the women would want to put themselves through this, but to get money. So if it were me, I'd almost stop trying to be a good Samaritan about it and just admit what it is and plead for a ton of money and damages. That's what I would have done, because nobody's going to believe you.
And that's
just be honest.
The Sports Illustrated one is interesting because I believe, now correct me if I'm wrong, but she actually is not involved in a lawsuit. So she told her story.
She's not a plaintiff.
Yeah.
Right, she's not a plaintiff. And she said in the article that she went to Busby and she did not like the way the Busby office handled her, and they were very anxious to get her to sign a contract with them, and she didn't like that, and so she didn't.
So, this story is obviously not going away.
It's basically, by the way, it's a huge logistical mess because all these lawsuits are separate lawsuits, and so they all got filed in a bunch of different courts. So this is not like one major huge case. It's 22 separate cases. Now, it's been consolidated for discovery purposes like this in the past couple of days. And so when the discovery disputes will be handled by one court, but there are orders in the record denying a full transfer to one court. So these are going to be 22 separate lawsuits when it gets through the discovery phase. So it is a huge logistical hassle.
So if you're watching the story, I think the next shoes to drop or the next big things to look for are, one, the results of the criminal investigation, which will be kind of keystone to a lot of this, I imagine. Which is on.
I guess we didn't talk about that. So let me just summarize here. Deshaun could have sexual assault, felony sexual assault, and then civil battery at a minimum charges. Now, multiple sexual assault charges can get you put away for decades. There's a difference between rape and sexual assault. Rape is insertion of a sexual organ into a sexual organ of another. That has not been alleged here. Sexual assault is the lesser version of it. And so that's what's been alleged here. But he could go to jail for decades until the end of his realistic football career. So his freedom is at stake here. The criminal part, we haven't heard any real news about where they are in it, except it's brand new. I would think evidence will be hard to come by, because unless these women have photos, they've probably saved text messages of appointments, but that doesn't really go to proof of what happened. So it's a little bit of a he said, she said, she said, she said, she said, she said kind of thing. But that's ongoing. But he's got his freedom and his career at risk. Make no mistake.
So watch for that, and then watch for what the NFL does. I think those are the next sort of two things to fall in place.
Why hasn't the NFL done anything or said anything? Because he's a franchise quarterback. You want to be cynical? That's the cynical thing. The really cynical thing about it, the Me Too movement or whatever, certainly, women should have their day and be heard. I fully agree and support that. The really cynical part is, why hasn't the NFL done anything? It's because of who he is.
Their most intriguing off-season story morphed into a probably more intriguing off-season story that they would rather not deal with.
And by the way, the other quarterbacks on the Texans roster is Tyrod Taylor and Ryan Finley. So good luck with that. And they only have $8 million in cap space left.
Yeah, and if you're for the WFT fans out there, there have been rumors of Alex Smith. Have you seen that rumor starting to bubble?
I have not. No, I did not.
That he may be their Band-Aid solution.
He might be their best option.
Yeah, and he's not going to need a ton of money.
That's not a half bad thought. Yeah.
Well, there we go. So I'm sure we'll revisit this story. The story is going nowhere fast, or somewhere fast, or just fast.
Hashtag content.
Yeah. So we go from the off-the-field dealings with real sports to the broadcast dealings of fake sports. And we look at... We sort of have fun with the WWE on a number of occasions. And they are certainly an interesting business. But they recently announced that they are going full Peacock and bringing all of their content, hashtag content, to the Peacock network with basically an exclusive broadcast deal. Well, not necessarily exclusive, but a long-term relationship. The long and the short of it is that the WWE had said that they were going to create their own streaming network. And, that they would centralize most and probably eventually all of their engagement there. So you think your WrestleManias, whatever 127 were on or whatever, and their regular shows would have... The original idea was that they would create a streaming network to do that. They quickly realized, and there's a good quote in one of the articles that says, the WWE eventually decided we are not a technology company, right? So that the lift to do that wasn't worth the result. And so instead, they turned around and signed this reportedly $1 billion deal with Peacock to bring all of your pro wrestling needs, desires, and quote-unquote matches to that streaming service rather than go it alone.
Yeah, so there's an article about this if you want to read up on it on CNBC, published April 8th. WWE is fully converted to Peacock now. It wants to make more contact by Jabari Young, and I believe we cited Jabari Young on this show before. Okay, so this is the article here says it's part of a more than $1 billion exclusive rights deal. So it is exclusive. Now, we talked about, I don't know, last year, 2 years ago, that WWE had a deal on Fox, and I'm not quite sure what happened to that deal. This article does not say. But this is a $1 billion deal. I think what's happened here, why they're doing this, is this. You can equate this to Shark Tank. If you guys have watched Shark Tank, you'll see that the people on Shark Tank will very often give up a greater percentage of their company than they really wanted to. And they're doing it to get a high profile, like Mark Cuban or whoever those other people are. They're doing it to get high profile investors. So they're willing to give up more percentage to get greater gross dollars. That's what's happening here. So they could get the technology done if they wanted. They'd just contract it out and it could be done. But they've realized is that they're going to make more money streaming on the Peacock network, which is NBC Universal's streaming service, than trying to gin up subscribers to their own network. Their audience is going to be bigger on Peacock because they can advertise on Peacock. People tune in just because they keep seeing it over and over again, whereas you'd have to get a bunch of subscribers to a WWE network, and that's not going to be the same. So that's why they're doing it. I think it's interesting to see how the WWE continues to rise in prominence in the sports world. It seems like every year it gets bigger and bigger. 'Cause even going back to like the 80s, Chris, when like you and I were kids and watching this stuff, when it was like the days of Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. This stuff wasn't on network television. Like the WrestleMania was a pay-per-view event, and every generation seems to get more and more prominent. So now we're fully integrated with NBC Universal. So WWE keeps increasing and rising in stature every decade. I find that interesting.
I'm furiously trying to see about if I can find what the implications are for the Fox deal. And I am having a hard time.
That's what I mean. Nobody's even mentioned it. I don't know what's happened to Fox.
Because it was a big deal for Fox. I mean, if for all of our NFL watchers out there, I mean, they were running they were running promos for their entry into
It was a
WWE.
$1 billion deal itself. It
Yeah.
was a $1 billion 5-year deal that was announced in 2018. And so what's happened to that is it's like it's a big mystery. Oh, okay, I got it. All right, this is from thewrap.com, and it's going to lock me out. Nope. Okay, I'm doing this on the fly. Okay. Oh, sorry about this, folks. This is something we tried to find and couldn't. Okay, so it was SmackDown is what was on Fox, and that was on, I think, Friday nights, I believe. Yeah, it's talking about the benefit to Peacock. Great. Okay, so this relationship's still going, and so nothing has changed. So the Fox SmackDown program is going to continue on Fox. And in spite of CNBC using the word exclusive, that's a whole nother set of programming that will exist. So they're basically saying what we're getting is exclusive and nobody else is providing it. So WWE has now 2 major contracts, one with Fox that runs through 2023 and the new one with Peacock. That's the answer.
I wonder.
Sorry about our hesitation, folks.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine that. I'm glad you found that because I can imagine it would have avoided that arrangement.
It was driving me crazy.
Yeah.
I'm glad. Yeah, I couldn't find it earlier.
And I wonder, the interesting, which we're not going to go off on Google right now, but one interesting thing to see is if that Fox content eventually is allowed to live in the library archives of Peacock. Because this means that like if you wanted to go back like Steve and I's era and watch like a Roddy Piper versus Jimmy Superfly Snuka match, you can actually do that. I mean, that's actually part of the value to a streaming like Peacock. I mean, it's the deep library archives, and yes, most people are going to be watching the whatever latest version of matches or WrestleMania, but for long-term engagement, the library aspects of these services are as valuable over time. So I'd be curious to see what happens to those Fox matches. Do they eventually get to live in the archives on Peacock?
You're just full of these references today. First, you pull out the peanut butter and chocolate analogy. Then you're pulling out Jimmy Superfly Snuka. My goodness.
One of the greatest wrestlers of all time.
Chris is on fire today. I don't know the answer to that in terms of the library. What happens to the Fox SmackDown? Don't know. But yeah, I've seen the ads on Peacock for this, and they are using footage of Hulk Hogan, and they're using footage of The Rock, and because he was '90s era, he was sort of the next generation, and so yeah, they are clearly drawing you in with they're trying to draw you and I in, who are sort of children of the '80s. They're trying to draw every generation in. It's a major, major push on Peacock, and it has to be because they spent $1 billion. And so the only way they can get their money out of this is to greatly increase their subscriber base. So that's a lot of subscribers they've got to reel in by WWE. So it will be a full-scale push to draw everybody in.
I have a few funny pro wrestling of our era stories. One was, I think I must have been in like 8th or 9th grade, and we went to vacation in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and we were at a hotel. And standing one person in front of us at check-in was one Sergeant Slaughter. So I spent vacation with Sergeant Slaughter. So it was totally funny to just see him like lounging at the pool or whatever. And I was 8th grade, so I was like, oh my God, it's Sergeant Slaughter. And then where I grew up in lovely Burke, Virginia, Big John Studd, rest in peace, lived in my neighborhood. And so I did 2 funny things with Big John Studd. One, he came in for New Year's Eve dinner at the restaurant that I worked in, Vinny's, if you know it, you love it. So I served Big John Studd his New Year's Eve dinner. And then one time I almost plowed into him in a car. So could you imagine if you and I would definitely have been at fault. It would have been
Big John Studd was killed today in an accident with a 16-year-old.
Or if he had lived, can you imagine a 17-year-old getting out of their car with an accident that was totally your fault and Big John Studd coming out of the driver's seat to yell at you?
Oh my God, was he nice to you at
Well,
least?
I don't. I think he gave me like a dirty. It was like one of those just missed, right? Like so, I screeched.
No,
I
I
took
mean
an
like
illegal.
generally speaking, was he nice to
Oh
you?
yeah. He was fine. He would come and he would come to. The third thing is he would come to my high school like once or twice. My run there, Lake Braddock High, go Bruins. Hubert Davis, there you go. Hubert Davis and I went to school together at the same time. So then give a big shout out to the new UNC head coach and former NBA player. Hubes, as we called him. But yeah, he would come and do like anti-steroids, which was hysterical. But he'd come and do anti-steroids talks at our high
Because he was
school.
probably full
Yeah,
of
totally.
raging steroids.
Yeah, so that was always that was my third big John Studd story.
I was trying to find the name of the wrestler I was on sat next to on an airplane once, and I'm not a huge wrestling fan, never was, and I can't find the name of it. Oh, it's gonna bother me now.
They
Uh,
seem like cartoon characters when you see them in real life.
well, this guy really wasn't though. He had long blonde hair. See if you can guess this, because again, it's bugging me. I think he was in sort of Hulk Hogan's universe. But he had long blonde hair. He wasn't that big. Like physically, I wasn't that impressed. He couldn't have been more than. Oh wait, was
Greg the
this
Hammer
him?
Valentine. I remember.
That's it. That was him.
Look at me.
I was on the. I sat next to Greg the Hammer Valentine on an airplane once, and he was a nice enough guy, but he was not physically impressed. It wasn't like I was standing next to the left tackle for the Chicago Bears or anything.
Yeah, he was. He was pretty flabby, if I remember correctly. And his big move is he would lay the figure four leg lock. So that was his signature move.
Well, he was even more flabby in person. Let me tell you.
The one person we sort of digress into celebrity sports sightings. The one person that was not flabby is I never forget. I was in high school probably, and I walked into like I don't know J.C. Penney's at Springfield Mall, and I was right behind Wilbur Marshall, of course, legendary linebacker and Super Bowl champion with both the Bears and the Redskins at the time,
He
obviously.
has major health problems now.
Oh, he does? Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, that's sad. I love Wilbur Marshall. But I was and I followed him at a safe distance around the department store for a few minutes because I could not get over the size of his calves. I remember it was summer, so he was in shorts. And I'll tell you what, you could fight off 10 attackers with this guy's calves. They were insane. I was marveling at the back of his leg shape.
Yeah, well, welcome to the '80s nostalgia podcast, people. Yeah, and Wilbur Marshall has been involved in a huge. He's permanently disabled and has been involved in a big dispute with the NFL over disability benefits and stuff. He's who was the coach of the Bears back then? The guy, the real
Ditka?
loudmouth. Yeah, Mike Ditka has spoken out about Wilbur Marshall many times.
Is it legs or is it brain?
Brain stuff.
Oh man.
Yeah, yeah. It's spinal cord. So yeah, it's yes.
That's sad. I love Wilbur Marshall. That is
Yeah, I did too.
Not
But
good to hear.
yeah, life has not been kind to him.
No. And
So anyway, so that's the wrestling story. I think it will be interesting to see kind of where in the coming years where WWE goes from here. Because people spend a lot of money on them, they need to deliver the audience. Whether or not they can do that remains to be seen.
well, they have a long history of having some audience, right?
And this is like next level.
Yeah,
for those, what
that's
they
$2
sign
billion
up for
in
now.
deals, basically, right?
Because years ago, like the WWE was on like the USA Network and pay-per-views, and they always sold well live, but they've never had $2 billion deals going with anybody.
Yeah, the history of wrestling going back to the 50s has been one hallmark of their product has been wild swings in popularity, right? Like be totally irrelevant for a long time, and then when you have your Hulk Hogan's and I think your John Cena's and your Rocks, right? And then it kind of like totally spikes, and so it sort of has these radio waves for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think Steve, we're all talked out for this week. Would you agree?
Yeah, we are, and I've, matter of fact, got to move on to the next show here. We have a guest
Oh, well,
on the Hog Style.
do you want to preview it?
Yeah, I can confidently preview it because I got a message from him during this show saying I'll be there. So, yeah, we've got Steve Shoup from Fanspeak on to talk about the draft this week on the Hog Style. He's our annual. We always do him around this time because he's got an amazing amount of knowledge in his head. This man is a human walking draft database. He is Mel Kiper of draft websites, only without the obnoxious hair.
There we go. Well, please find out all of the middle linebackers that we need to draft with number 19.
We will do that, and he will know.
Awesome, because that is their number one need. Don't at me. All right, so we will be back in 2 weeks. Of course, you can check out all the content on the Hogsty Network, and see you then.